sustainability of clubs and everything else to do with women's rugby. Our guest this evening is one who, I don't even know how many titles, Helen, you hold at Black Pearls. I think about, or do we just say Helen is Black Pearls itself? Because founder, coach, player, I think finance manager.
I also the pastor. CEO.
But Helen, good evening, good to have you.
Good evening, thank you for having me.
How are you doing? It's been a minute.
Yeah, it's been a long while.
Yeah,
couple of years.
Oh yes, couple of years. Good to have you again, like I said. Let's start with a bit of the good. Just before we saw that document that announced whatever it announced, 4-time champions. Unfortunately, now you're withdrawing. But let's speak about the journey to winning those 4 championships. How has it been? Just before the bad side did come through, if I should say.
Yeah, it was a process. It didn't happen overnight. We joined the league. We were losing games. There were very many young players, and it was just a journey of discovery, And I had really small players, so we were like 15s is not really our game. It's 7s is more our game. So we focused more on winning 7s, but we play 15s because to me, real rugby is 15s. And then you have the players who are not cut out for 7s, so they need to play as well. But we weren't really concerned about the results in 15s. So 7 must win 7s, must win 7s. So we started winning the 7s championships until we'd play 15s and the scores started getting smaller and smaller and smaller until the players were like, but coach, why don't we try and win the 15s title? I'm like, are you sure you guys want to do that? And they were like, yeah. So I was like, okay, so we need to change how we do our strength and conditioning. It's going to be tough. Are you ready for that? They were like, yes. Because I'm also a strength and conditioning coach. So we started preparing for that because the strength and conditioning for 7s and 15s is totally different. And so we worked on that until now we actually started winning 15s games. I developed a style of play which would favor our smaller players because we didn't have the big forwards to, grind out, just creating space for the backs. So we just adapted a style of play to maximize on our strengths and to minimize on our weaknesses, and it started working out for us. So we won the first title and girls were like, oh, we like this. We won the second title and they're like, we're not going to lose again. And we were winning the titles without losing any games, until last year it was a bit the financial challenges started coming in, but it really hit us last year where actually the last game of the league, we didn't have money to play that game. But, and we actually didn't need to play that game to win the league. We were just so ahead that if we lost the game, we would still win the league. We'd get a walkover. But when a walkover is awarded, the winning team gets only 4 points. But if you play a game and you get a winning bonus point, which means you score 3 more tries than your opponent, you get a bonus point. So those are 5 points. So I thought about it and I was like, yeah, we can decide to give a walkover, but then we'd win the title, but there'll be that question mark, And I also don't like giving walkovers, so I was like, we'll find a way. But I'd warned the union that we may not actually play that game. I told them the chances of us playing this game, very small. It's not until, I think, Friday night that I confirmed we'd be able to actually play the game. So, but we didn't train that entire week. We just pitched up and I was like, guys, let's go for the win. But if we lose, Thunderbirds must not get a bonus point. And there's a point in the game, they had a bonus point until we just battled it, we scored a try, we defended, we lost, they didn't get the bonus point, so we won the title. But that was our first loss to Thunderbirds since, I think it was 2020. And then our first loss in the league for 4 years. Yeah. Wow. So, yeah, so it's been quite a journey, but it's just that whole telling the players this is what we expect, and then the players are like, okay, we can do this, and then the players saying, but coach, we think we can do this. I'm like, but if you want this is what is going to have to happen, and they're like, bring it on. At some points they're like, then I'm like, yeah, I know you hate me, but when we win the title, you love me, and they're like, okay. And so that's how it was, and it's just been great seeing these young players, develop into, really strong players. They started making it onto the national team, being key players for Uganda, And I think when you're coaching, there's no better feeling than that. Especially like since most of my players, I get them when some have never seen a rugby ball before, or if they've seen it, they've never actually held it before, or they're very young. Some of the players had been with them since they were 13, 14 years old. And so just seeing them grow gradually over the years into those players. I used to be a referee. I used to actually referee in the men's premiership. And I'd also coach and I'd also play, but it became too much. I was like, I need to drop one. I loved playing too much, and I was like, coaching is more fulfilling than actually refereeing. So I picked the two.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just before the gentlemen do come in, like I said, when we saw that later, of course, he's stating the reasons being financial, but in the lead up to that letter being put out by the Uganda Rugby Union, I know you've hinted on how you warned them about that final game of the season, but take us through the occurrences in the lead up to the letter that we did see last Monday.
Yeah. It's been a long-standing issue in Uganda women's rugby, teams struggling with finances. Initially, we had a 4-team league, and actually it was 3 teams, and the teams were just like central based. There was a team in Entebbe, then there was us, and then there was Thunderbirds. So just basically playing around. Then there was Black Panthers before they folded, but still, you know, around that area. Then when She-Wolves came in, it was great having a team. No, it was Mbale Eagles, a team from Mbale. It was great having them, but most of the time it would be walkovers because they weren't able to get to Kampala or get to Entebbe, you know. So that was when it was a 4-team league. Then suddenly the league jumped from being a 4-team league to a 7-team league. And that's where the struggles really began. But everyone was like, this is great. We need more games, you know, and having more teams. But there was no real discussion on how the teams would be funded. Because the reality is there's not a single women's rugby team, apart from maybe Thunderbirds, because they're under Chadundo, and Chadundo has a way, gets money for all its teams. But all the rest of the teams rely on the union and on well-wishers and individuals putting in their own money. So there's no real discussion on how the league would be funded and how teams would manage. So it's been a challenge. Last year, we were literally fundraising every weekend. And I thought it was just maybe Pearls, but I said it can't just be us, you know. So I talked to some of the other clubs, and they said we're actually struggling. And Women's Day last year, there was actually a danger of none of the games going on. So that's when I did a fundraiser for all the clubs, with the exception of Thunderbirds, because they're quite comfortable. And the games managed to go on, except the one for Rapids, because what I raised wasn't enough for them to travel to Chadundo. So they were like, we really appreciate it, but it's still not enough for us, so we still can't play. So it's been a challenge, and some of the issues is the transport, then even hosting games, because there's pitch marking, ambulance, security, ball boys, that sort of thing. So sometimes you just cut down things, like there are not going to be any fans anyway, so no security, you know, that sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, literally, you know, every time there's a women's game and we're like, oh, we're alone, so we're going to play for the grass and the trees and the birds. And I always say when we're playing at King's Park, because there are monkeys around there, I'm like, oh, so we also have monkeys watching us. Because, I mean, literally, when there are men's games going on a weekend, there's no one who's going to come and watch the women. As opposed to if you put the women's games at 2, then people will be like, okay, so we have 2 games to watch. Let's turn up and watch the women. But like, for example, if you have, let's say, Black Pearls playing at King's Park, because we're 2 teams there, Black Pearls and Pirates. So if you have Black Pearls playing at 2 and Pirates at 4, people will pitch up. They're like, let's support Pearls as well. But if you have Pirates playing at Chadundo and Pearls playing at King's Park,
no one.
Have you had that discussion with the union?
We consistently have that discussion, you know, but it's still something which is a challenge. Like this year in our fixtures, Pearls was going to host at King's Park 4 games, you know. And then there are other teams which complain. You know, you have Rapids playing in Ginger while Hippos is traveling. Then when Hippos is in Ginger, Rapids is traveling. You know, then the other day, Panthers was at Legends and Cobbs had traveled, and they really struggled to raise that money so that they could host, you know. Actually, there's where Panthers reached out, and they were like, we see, because before Pirates was going to play the Enterprise Cup at One Kulukuku. So Panthers was like, why don't we co-host? You guys play at 4, we play at 2, and then we share the costs. And I told them, I'd love that, but we're actually pulling out of the league. You know, so there's some of these discussions which you try to have amongst ourselves as clubs. So the financial challenges are there, but until that is solved, there are going to still be a lot of walkovers in the women's league, and other teams may take the brave step that we've taken and withdraw.
Yeah, and Helen, you speak about the women's league, but we also know of men's teams that have also not, honored their fixtures. But
over the weekend,
exactly. But while you've engaged the Uganda Rugby Union, what has the reception been like?
Their hands are tied because they don't have the money, you know. And the challenge is, before the season began, we were informed, okay, you're going to get money, and we looked at the money we're going to get, and we're like, okay, this can push us. It's not enough to cover everything, but at least it will cover a good amount, and then we can raise the other money. But we got half of that, you know. So then when you look at the fixtures you have left, and you're not sure whether you're going to get money or not, I was like, nah, I'm not doing this. Last year I kept on, you know, and it's emotionally draining. It's exhausting. Consistently fundraising, talking to people, putting in your own money. And I was like, I'm not doing that this year, you know. So the game against Avengers, I raised the money, put in my own money, where we hosted at Kings Park alone. And we had like 3 fans and loads of monkeys and birds watching us. And I was like, this isn't right, you know. Pearls and Avengers are like top teams, you know. We shouldn't be playing in front of no one, you know. Then we also had Thunderbirds who were going to host at Kings Park alone. And I was like, no, it's really not making sense at all. And when you look at the men's team struggle, but the women's teams, it's worse because we have no sponsors. We don't have gate collections to rely on. We can't sell replicas to get money. And then we barely get fans showing up to our games, especially when they put us, you know, playing alone in front of no one. So, you know, even which sponsor would want to come and sponsor a game where they see like 2 people?
Helen, 2 things. One, when you're talking to us here, logically, it makes all the sense. It even benefits the union to have these women rugby games played alongside the men's rugby games, because then you lock the people in, and then the others come. So
that way, growing.
Yeah, it beats my understanding, because that does not cost them money, does it? It beats my understanding why they can't take it on. When you discuss with them, what do they tell you?
Okay, the reasons are that not every men's premiership team has a women's side. Okay. That's one. Okay. Then 2, the men's format changed, so they don't have home and away anymore, which is partially valid, but that's if you first do the men's fixtures and then try to fit the women's fixtures. And I propose first fix the women's fixtures and then fit the men's games around them, you know. Like now, you know, because before, you know, let's say Pirates is going to host Cobs and Cobs will host Pirates, you know, so there'd be that home away thing. But then now they do it in such a way, because those are the big 3. So each of the big 3 have one home game. So like this year, the first game was Pirates hosting Cobs. We hosted U's, and ideally we should have hosted Panthers, because Panthers is linked to Cobs, you know. Then when Heathens hosted Pirates, initially it was supposed to be Thunderbirds playing Panthers. They changed it literally the week before the game. We got an email on the Monday saying that actually you guys will play instead against Thunderbirds. Yet that weekend we had a bye. You know, so it was suddenly switched. We weren't prepared for it, but they were like, it would make more sense, which was great. Okay, yeah, Pirates would be there, Heathens would be there, and then we'd be there. But then it was a last-minute thing, you know. So if the women's fixtures are done first, and another thing which I've also suggested is, why not have a women's fixture at 4? Because even if you put a men's fixture at 2, fans will still show up.
Then they will leave after the men's game.
Actually, not all.
don't think they
Not
will.
all, probably not.
Not rugby fans.
Football, yes.
Not rugby fans.
Having been in the football circles, I just couldn't understand it.
Yeah.
The game ends and shwee, everyone is out
Because
of the stadium.
football, Helen,
them
has
around.
failed to create an environment that
That's
people
the
can
thing.
stick to.
But rugby, people will stay around because they know after the game,
There is rugby after the rugby.
there's fun to be had. So the men would play at 2, and then even if somebody didn't know there's a women's game, they'd look and be like, oh, there's actually a game happening,
yeah.
and they would watch.
They'll hang around,
you know?
yeah.
I mean, there have been so many times when I've been at a women's rugby game, like if Pulse isn't playing and I'm at a women's rugby game, and then you hear guys say, oh, this is my first time watching a women's rugby game, and this is actually quite interesting. And the comments they make, they're like, wow, they actually tackle really well, or they pass the ball better than the men, or they're less selfish than the men. That this is actually quite fun to watch, you know? So women's rugby shouldn't be really looked at as men's rugby. We're not as physical as the men, but we're physical in our own way because, of course, we're playing against fellow women. But there are different things, like the teamwork is more, and we approach rugby in a different way. So it's interesting if you sit down and watch it as a sport in its own. And there's so many people who've watched women's games. Afterwards, they come and say, when is your next game? You need to tell us. Why don't we know about these games? You know. So, and then also the challenge that we have is so much focus is put on the men's games that talking about the women's game becomes like an afterthought, you know. So even when like there's a big men's game going on, you have everyone talking about the men's game, the men go on TV, the men go on radio, but no one says there's a women's game at 2, you know. And then the fans say, why don't you let us know? We're like, we're trying, you know, but we need the push from the media. We need the push from the union. So I can blame the media as well because you focus so much on the men. But if you just, as you're talking about the men, you say, there's a women's game going on as well, and then you hype up the women's game as well. Hype up particular players, you know. Show highlights of exciting moments in the women's game. Don't show highlights of knock-ons. Show highlights of a big hit, a handoff, you know, a huge tackle, somebody diving when they score a try. But some of the highlights you see which are shown on TV, it's the worst parts of the women's game.
Karim, I hope we have a Manzi.
I think we are guilty as charity.
I hope we have a Manzi because every time he's done a rugby starter, at least fair enough, a Manzi will mention the ladies' games as well and take us through the results. Karim, do you have a Manzi? I'm sure he has something to say. Emanzi, please, come on, let's have this discussion about women's rugby. We have Helen here.
Yeah, thank you, Justin, and it's good to see Helen in studio. I know the good job that she does for women's rugby, and of course, it's very emotional when you hear her speak about the challenges that they go through, and you keep wondering why exactly they keep doing it year in, year out, because they could have opted not to show up this season. If you go into your last game of the season and the finances are not aligning, chances are high that some teams would not recover to continue in the next season. So kudos to her and the team at Black Pearls to continue pushing, and we hope that there's a lasting solution going forward. I think the issue of women's rugby is not even limited to clubs. At some point, the women's national team would have to do fundraisers through the fans at games and just to make sure that they are able to play their fixtures. And it's really upset. I hope the union has a lasting solution. When you look at what, for example, the basketball people have done, is that when you have the City Oilers, for example, playing the NAM Blazers on a Friday, that the first game will be a women's game. So you actually have more people now that are very interested and hooked to the women's game, and who will even choose to watch maybe JKO taking on UCU or JT Lady Jaguars playing the Lady Cannons ahead of a men's game. Because the truth is that there is quality on the two sides that you might not even find on the men's side. So it's sad. to see a team like Black Pearls dominated Ugandan rugby. If you go back a few years, like 5 years, I don't think we've had a team that has been as dominant as the Black Pearls. So for them to come out and show you that they do not have the financial muscle to continue, you can only imagine what's happening at what you would call the lesser clubs or the other clubs that are not as more established as the Black Pearls. So it's a sad story to tell. It's the reality of Ugandan rugby, not just women's rugby, by the way. There are many men's teams that are struggling to make ends meet. And like you guys highlighted, you saw that we had a walkover in the men's game, and it is sad to look at it that way. So hopefully there is a lasting solution. I hope you'll tell us what next for them, because if you're pulling out at this point, does that mean that you're regrouping for the next season, or are you closing shop? I think that is the most important question that Ugandans would want to get an answer for.
Okay, Manzi. Helen, that's definitely going to be the question that closes the discussion, though. Closes the discussion.
Because maybe also just mine, because you're not only speaking for your club, but one would think that you're speaking for women's rugby in the country. And you just highlighted the challenges you have to go through just to prepare for a match day. And one would wonder the challenges now you have to go through as people who are in charge of those women's teams to prepare for a match day. How tough is it before we even talk about the day of the match?
Yeah, it's really tough because there's training costs which have to be catered for. So rugby is an amateur sport, especially for the women. So we train in the evenings, and off season we train on the weekends. So basically players don't get allowances, they get transport refunds, you know. And same with match day, you get transport refunds. So you've got to get the players to training, and then when players are injured, you've got to cover those injuries, and you should have a physio during training when you're doing contact training, because injuries can happen during contact training. So that's quite a bit. And then there are also some things which are not really related to rugby, but it's still part of the team thing. You can have players who you discover they're not in school because of lack of school fees. And it really bothers me when somebody's not in school, you know. So then you need to look for school fees to make sure she's in school. Somebody doesn't have school requirements, you know. So you've got to make sure that is happening, because as much as they're playing rugby, you need to prepare players for life after sport, you know. And then sometimes, because a lot of parents don't want their daughters playing sport, especially rugby, you've got to give the parents a reason to let their daughters play. So if you're covering school fees or school requirements, then the parents aren't so, you know, hostile to the daughters playing rugby. Some actually become quite supportive, to the extent of they even call you, don't they have training today? You know, that sort of thing. So so those are things which you've got to do to keep the game going. You'd be surprised how many players just don't even have footwear, you know. So you've got to get for them sneakers or boots, you know. So sometimes, because you can only get one pair of boots, you tell them these ones are for match day. So they pitch up for training barefoot, or you can get sneakers and they wear sneakers. So it's a real struggle to keep the players going, because the dynamics for women's rugby are a lot different from the men's, you know. A lot of the male players come from schools like Namnyango, Budo, SMAC, Makos. So it can be confusing when you hear that you've got to get boots for the players, but for most of the female players, they come from low socioeconomic backgrounds. You know, it is extremely rare to get a player coming from Namagunga, Gayaza, or King's College Budo playing rugby. It is rare. I think one of the players who came from Namagunga, who I can think of off the top of my head, is Charlotte Mudola. She did her O-levels at Namagunga, then her A-levels at Vienna. Actually, she started playing at rugby at Vienna. That's when she got into it. But then her brothers already played.
I was actually going to ask that you know how to well. What are the chances that she would be in the sport if it wasn't for her brothers?
That's the thing. But you see, because she already got into it in Vienna, and it's actually Martin Karungunjo, who's the current defense coach for Pirates. He was in Vienna, and he got her into rugby. Because he was like, you're a Mudola, why are you playing volleyball? Rugby is the sport for you. Come. So she started playing rugby there. Then when she got into her VAC, the mom had found her volleyball team. But then her brother said, you know, there's actually rugby. Go and look for Buteme at Chadondo. And the good thing is her mother was supportive. So, but I can't think of anyone else from Namagunga, anyone from Gayaza or Budo, at least who has played for this amount of time. So for the women, it's a totally different dynamic, down to you've got to get them transport for training. Somebody probably coming from Namliango will be able to get themselves to and from training, but quite a number of the women can't, you know. So you've got to support them in that, you know. If you tell them, ask your parents for money, they'll be like, I've been told to stop this game. Yes, okay. So there are those challenges that we have, just keeping the team together.
Okay, the discussion definitely does go on and on and on and on, including when we return after the break, we'll be discussing what Emanzi hinted on, but most importantly, as a country, how do we go from where women's rugby is? Remember, we have 2 poll questions that are already up on our social media platform last week, and that's where our discussion is coming from with our guest this evening, Helen Buteme, who is everything about Black Pearls, like we did say, from a player to the coach, to the founder, to the CEO, and every other title that you can mention. But before...
Just being modest that we only attach Black Pearls.
Yes.
She's in that league of sports administrators in this country, who when you see them, you see the sports.
You see the sports.
One of them is Mr. Simon Mugabe in badminton. When you see him,
you see the business, you see the sport, you
so.
see the sport. And just to mention that she goes beyond rugby. She does some work with some football teams. Yeah. So Helen is just...
she has some interesting stories from football too. Probably
don't go there. Don't go there. But just before we headed into the break, Clive, you meant to say something. Am I right?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, there was a time, you could probably also try to clear the air. There was a time when Black Pearls and Pirates were more like one entity. Does that relationship still exist?
No, we're independent, but we both use Kings Park as our home ground. It's just pretty much the same thing, down to financial challenges, you know. The women's clubs that are paired with the men's teams will still tell you, man, it is hard, you know. And so Pirates was also struggling with Pirates itself, and then you also have Pearls. Then remember, they also had the Sailors before URU removed the second teams and now had reserve teams. So they were running 3 teams. And they were just not able to handle it. And it was causing a lot of friction because sometimes money wouldn't be there, or they'd be like, no, you can't take part in the league, or go for games, there's no money for us. So in the end, we're like, you know, and then sometimes decisions about what to do, we prefer to make decisions which we felt were comfortable with us. It's the same thing we're saying, URU is making decisions on behalf of women's rugby without really talking to the stakeholders, which are the women's clubs. So it was the same thing. So we prefer to make the decisions. We had a meeting as a team, and I told them it's going to be difficult. They said, it's okay, let's go this on our own, you know. So, which we've done, and some people are saying, oh, it's because you left Pirates, but no, it was exactly the same situation in Pirates, you know. It's just that I have decided, instead of really struggling, to pull out, because it, like I said, it's just mentally draining, you know, always looking for money, always stressing yourself. And so I just decided, you know, just take a step back, you know, and really think, what is it that we're going to do? You know, how are we going to move forward from here? Because it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable for Black Pearls, and it's not sustainable for the other teams. Last year, the league was fought with walkovers. You know, this year there are no walkovers yet. You know, so a discussion needs to be had with the women's clubs. How can we operate? You know, the reality is, we can't operate on our own. We still need URU to support us financially. But how much, a real conversation needs to be had. How much can URU realistically give us? And then with the money they give us, what can we realistically achieve with it? Instead of giving us money and then saying, you must find a way. It's just not possible. It's not possible. And when you talk to other clubs, they're also breaking. They're like, we can't keep on like this. Yeah.
Related to that, and also to Emma's question, very often when clubs pull out of the competition, they don't survive. If we go to basketball, Warriors, and you have people perhaps who root for you. So Emma's question is quite relevant. Maybe you have no answers, but it needs to be asked. What next for Black Pearls, but also for you, if you're going through all that trouble, what keeps you going?
Like I said, coaching the players, watching them go through those stages. I've got Emily in Japan, you know. There's no other Uganda female rugby player who's a pro player. She's the first, you know. That's a huge achievement. And, you know, me looking at her there, I'm like, yeah, I was with Emily from when she was 13 years old. Now she's 26 years old playing in Japan, pro rugby, you know. So me looking at these players, you know, developing as players, and then I don't stop on the rugby pitch, you know, making sure these players finish school, you know. I usually tell them at least stop at S4. Then you can do a vocational course, or you can go on to A-levels, you know, if you have the potential to do A-levels. If you're already fighting with books, I tell you there's no point in going for A-levels. It's just wasting money, you know. Branch off into a course. What can you do? But if you're academically bright, go for A-levels, and then we see what happens with university. And that's what I did with Emily. She went right up to university, graduated, first university graduate in her family.
Wow.
You know. So I look at other girls and I'm like, I need them to be able to get out from where they are. Like I said, many are from low socioeconomic backgrounds, but it shouldn't be like that. So what can I do to change them, not just on the pitch, but off the pitch, you know, making sure they go through that. But then now, when you look at it, why I do this is because I'm very passionate about rugby. I love rugby. So that's why I help girls who are in rugby, because I feel that connection with them, you know, and I spend a lot of time with them, so I get to know them. So now what it means for Pearls, now that we've withdrawn, my feeling is that if this is not resolved, if we don't have a genuine conversation about how we can move forward with women's rugby, we're not going to return for 15s. There's the 7s, which is coming up. 7s, they're fewer numbers, so we can be a 7s team. But what I don't like about that is you've got girls who are not suited for 7s.
And they want to play.
And they want to play
And you
rugby.
feel like you're losing your soul.
Exactly.
Your rugby soul.
That's it. Because 7s is not really rugby. You know, 7s is for, you know, elite athletes. You know, you can get somebody who has never held a rugby ball before, teach them a few basics in 1 week and throw them onto a 7s pitch and they'll perform. You can't do that on a 15s pitch, you know.
Clive,
you know, so there's that. So it would hurt me because of, you've got girls who you tell them, it doesn't matter if you're not fast. It doesn't matter if you're not skinny. It doesn't matter if you've never played a sport before. It doesn't matter if you're not a quick thinker. There's a position for you on the rugby pitch. You tell people you don't need to lose weight. Be proud of your size, you know. But now you're basically telling them there's no room for you in Pearls anymore, you know. If anyone wants to go to another team, they'd be free to go, you know.
But they'll find the same challenges.
That's the thing. So, yeah, so we're looking at 7s, which will probably start around August. Yes, so we'll see how that goes. But when it comes to 15s, I'm not willing to try for another 15 season without having a proper discussion. All the women's clubs, it has to be all the women's clubs, and the union having an honest discussion, because I know money is short.
Yeah.
It's not just in rugby. Women's sport generally suffer in the country. I mean, you get the same thing happening in football with the women's teams failing to turn up for games or failing to host games, teams with, you know, incomplete kits, then players in football crying for not being paid, hungry, if not eaten, that sort of thing. So we need to be honest. We want to grow the sport, but I feel like we're leaping before we've set a proper foundation. You know, it's like putting these beautiful tiles on the roof of a house before you've got a solid foundation and walls. So when the wind comes, those tiles will be blown and they'll break. I think that's what is actually happening. There's a lot of focus on the national teams, but without the clubs, there's no national team. You know, we've struggled to have numbers in training because we've got a lot of players in the national team setup, and they have a lot of training sessions, so they get fatigued. They don't have enough time, so they skip the club training sessions so that they rest. And you can understand, national team, they get pretty much double the transport refunds that they'd get at club level. Then when you make it onto the national team, you get $100 per game. So of course you prioritize the national team, and then there's that pride of playing for your country. But as clubs, we also want our players. And some clubs have decided, you know what, okay, the national team players are not available to us, that's okay. But that's 1 or 2 players. I've got 8. That's half my team. So, you know, you can't say, oh, they're not available, we move on. You know, that's so many players you've lost. So it becomes a challenge. So there has to be a balance where clubs feel valued and there's more focus on the clubs, because when you build strong clubs, then you have a stronger national team. Because I feel with the focus on the national team and the national teams, both 7s and the 15s, and the results that we've got, I don't think it justifies that focus.
I think the union can start with what you suggested in terms of trying to at least attract sponsors. For example, you playing at the same time the top men's games are happening, because then you can tell the sponsor, hey, look, you're having prime visibility on the day. So the union might not necessarily give you that cash, but they can position you to get the cash.
Because the few games where it happens, there's some games where it happens. You've got, you know, good amount of people, and they're really supporting women's rugby. They're cheering, they're following the game, and afterwards the comments, the feedback, it's great. Like the last game of the league we played last year, there were 3 women's games happening at the same time at Chadondo. There was no men's rugby at all. Chadondo was full. The atmosphere was brilliant.
How much does that do? I mean, what does it do to your heart when you see the stadium full?
You're like, people actually care about the game. You see, even like as a coach, as players, you know, you feel like, okay, it's worth it playing. Because, man, you know, you're battered, you're hit on pitch, you come off limping, you're injured, you're not paid, and then there's no one to clap you out, no one to cheer for you. It's really demoralizing, you know. So it's great. Like, we lost that game at Chadondo, but just having the fans then coming up to you and saying, don't worry, we still support you, you know. When we've played at King's Park before Pirates, when we win the games, fans cheering, screaming, and afterwards they come and say, man, great game. Fans coming and buying, you know, drinks for players, or they say, I like the way she played. They hand over money to a player. You know, these are things which players appreciate, you know. Even somebody just come and saying, I love the way you played. You know, somebody posting on social media, there's this move I saw the ladies do, you know, and then somebody even posts a clip. They took a clip with their phone, and you're like, they were paying attention. Or when somebody breaks down the moves they saw, you're like, they were actually watching the game, they paid attention, and they enjoyed it. As a coach, you're like, I'm doing something right. And the players themselves are like, people value us. So even if you're not paid,
you know, Ellen, why I appreciate that, and I'm not an elite sportsman. When you're running on the road and you meet someone that they just say, oh, none, or well done, it's like you're just starting afresh.
Exactly.
I hear you.
Earlier on, you mentioned Emily. How much impact did her move have on your team or organization, but also women's rugby in general? And if you're free with sharing, how tough was it for you guys to have get to Japan?
Yeah. Of course, Emily leaving was a huge impact because there's a way she just breaks defenses. She's one of those players who break defenses and she'll do things for the team. So of course it had an impact. At the same time, her leaving was also good because it forced other players to step up, you know, and it also helped in, there are certain ways, like there's certain structures which I keep trying to implement. But then sometimes it reaches a point in the game and the players are like, nah, just get the ball to Emily, and you're like, what are you doing, you know? So when she's not on pitch, players are forced to follow the structures, you know, so they grow more as players. And then Emily leaving was good as well because she wasn't growing as a player, you know. She'd get the ball and she just runs around or just gives handoffs. And as much as I tell her, you know, you need to change how you do this, you need to do X, Y, Z, and she'd go into the game, she gets the ball, runs around, gives handoffs, and whatever I've said, just, you know. So she wasn't growing as a player. She needed more of a challenge. And then her going also made people see that it's possible for me to study, finish university, but still be a good rugby player, and I can go and play professional rugby. It's possible to be a Ugandan and play professional rugby. You know? So there's all that. So of course, now identifying other key players in the team. Those ones I'd already identified. The challenge is getting them to believe that they can step up into Emily's shoes and carry the team forward. So that self-belief is something which has to be worked on with the players.
Emanzi, any final question for Helen as we wrap this one up?
A question really, but I just pray that everything aligns and we have Black Pearls playing in the league again, because it's very tough when you look at the league, and it's very easy for us to focus on the games that are played on Saturday and look at the fans that are watching, if there is any gate collection. But we forget that the players have to be prepared for that Saturday, and that's where most of the hard work actually goes in, and there are expenses that are really, that must be met if you're going to organize a team to play on the weekend. So you can just imagine, you're talking about a team that is preparing for 15, so just look at the numbers, and it shows you how much money or resources that you need to just train, not even go for the matches, but training and preparing for those games. So it is very tough. I know that you guys in studio have heard about the talk of government coming in to support football teams, and maybe people like Helen should be asking the questions to the same government that when you talk about supporting clubs, it should not necessarily be just football. There are other clubs in other sports disciplines, and Buteme's team contributes to the national team because they have players that are playing for the national team. So if you're looking at helping out football that many think is already doing well, there is food for thought for the government.
Okay.
But football made a case for themselves.
That's what I was going to say. That Helen,
the Uganda Rugby Union has to take the same direction to make a case for rugby.
Do you feel someone needs to make the case more sound?
Yeah, I think the problem with rugby, it's such a niche sport. You know, very few people know about it. So I think one thing rugby needs to do is market itself better and get into primary schools. And what I keep saying is, get more women involved in rugby.
What Emanzi is mentioning is now at the level of decision makers. Because yes. I've seen trips where the state minister for sports is traveling with the national team alongside the government chief whip, who is the former minister for sport. and they are there, they are very excited, they are happy, the team is doing well. So if the union is engaging them, just like Moses Magogo does engage the other people, I think it shouldn't be that hard to sell for government to say, you know what, probably the next financial year we need to consider this.
There's a time they were Chad Dondo recently. What was it? We did see Dr. Bernard Dogwell, and I think they
the thing is, government has embraced the sport. So it is upon the union, probably one day we shall have the president here going in Kayango, it is upon the union to take the direction that football has taken to convince the regulators or the people with the money that if we did this, probably we would be able to achieve much more than what we are achieving now. A discussion needs to start.
I think government also looks at numbers.
Yeah.
Because if it were about performance, football should not be getting that money. It would be netball. It would be long distance running because those are the ones who are consistently bringing us results year in, year out, you know. So they're looking at the numbers.
Yeah.
That's why I was saying, rugby, netball, athletics, we need to get the numbers.
Helen, I still want to disagree because this discussion started because the day this discussion started, football and netball were in the same environment or room with the head of state. One asked for a budget for their federation to be ring-fenced in the financial year moving forward. The other asked for a bus. Yet at the time they're asking for a bus, they are renting office around Kampala. So you see, these are two federation heads in front of the head of state, and both of them have different priorities.
Who asked for the bus?
I think
somebody asked for the bus.
And got a bus.
I think like they asked for money to be put aside for ABCD before. Right now, they are entitled to 17 billion, but it is a discussion that was started.
Clive's point makes sense in terms of representing yourself, but we cannot discard the fact that football is what it is. Football is a universal sport. Everyone wakes up, they are born, there's something in front of them, they kick it, everyone understands it. They may not go down into the details of technical bits and all, but it's what it is. Yeah. They may not win, but we'll feel Nambole.
That's it.
And we'll talk about it. So football has a head start. If it's 100 meters, football at 80. Rather, 80
I'll
meters.
give the other example. NCS has this rule to be a federation. You have to cover 75% of the districts in Uganda. Football is already there.
Like it's there.
By default.
It's already there. So now we are struggling to cover those 75. You know, football in every district. There's a football pitch.
There's a bomber ground.
Exactly. And there will be at least a primary school, a secondary school, and a team. Several village teams play. Whereas rugby, you go to districts and they'll see a rugby ball and they'll ask you, what is that?
Yeah. And in rugby, almost every one of you has a football team they support.
Yeah.
Okay, Helen and the gentlemen, we need to wrap up this conversation. But Helen, before we get to the question of, how do we move on from this? And I know you've hinted on, your decisions as Black Pearls. When that statement was put out, there's a bit of uproar from the fans, but also you expect that is a decision that should get maybe people at the Uganda Rugby Union, concerned. Have you sensed that? Have you sensed a bit of concern away from the fans? Because, fans are just fans, from the people that really make decisions regarding rugby. Have you sensed a bit of that?
Well, our email wasn't responded to.
Oh, up to now?
Up to now. But we received a phone call if it's possible for us to play the game, to host Nile Rapids, if it was possible, and we said no. Then there was a meeting, we had clubs with the union and a lot of the concerns.
Helen, the phone call requesting you to host Nile Rapids was after your decision?
Yes.
So you're being requested to host Nile Rapids without offering a solution to your challenge, or a solution was being offered?
We were told that they would possibly be able to support us for the Rapids game. But that would just be one game, and there were other games, and we had already called it a wrap, so we're like, no. Then the following week, we had a meeting clubs with the union, and a lot of the concerns being raised were about the national team, the impact it was having on the clubs. And again, we were asked, was that our final decision? It's like, yes, it's the final decision. Yeah. So I think it's something probably the union saw coming. And the reality is they just don't have the money. That's why Kakira were not able to travel to play Pirates, because it's not just the women's clubs struggling, the men's clubs are also struggling. And the funny thing is, I was told that as Pearls, we rushed to say we can't host Rapids, because Rapids were actually going to write to the union and say they can't travel for the game.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
You beat them to the game.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is a problem. And the challenge is the union wants to grow the game, but the funding is not there. Yeah. And they're relying on clubs to grow the game, but clubs don't have the money to do it, and we're relying on the union, you know. So that's why I'm saying an honest conversation needs to be had about where the priorities are, and if perhaps things need to be changed and how the game is being approached. I think probably not just on the women's side, since men are also having challenges, but for the women especially, because if you only have one women's club that can survive without support from the union, then it's a huge issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Helen, let's wrap this one up. Is that what is going to be what takeaway? You know, that we need to have an honest conversation. Going back to what Emma's did in Hinton, and I'm gonna behave like the Uganda Rugby Union. Is that your final decision? So what do you want us to take away from this conversation? You don't even want to have a discussion with her. So where do we go from here?
Yes, so for Pearls, our 15th season is done. We will look at sevens and see how we regroup for sevens, and we will see. Hopefully, as a rugby community, we can find a way to make the game more sustainable for the women's teams, so that next season, because there's supposed to be a team promoted, so we're 8 teams. And something I said at the beginning of the season is, as much as we'd love to have women's club, that 8th team is going to be a problem. So unless there's going to be more money next season, it's going to be a huger issue. So I even suggested that the union, if it must promote a team, caps it at 8.
Or they send one to join you. Oh.
Yeah, they're going to send one from, they're going to be regional playoffs between Eastern, Western, Northern, and Central. And then the winner will come to join the league.
How is the consistency at that level?
Again, finances. Finances. The players are there and teams are willing, but the finances.
Yeah.